About a week ago, I put up a very short video showing this. This is the chassis of an IMA303. It was actually still in its faceplate in the original video. The question was, can you tell based on what you see in the video what the clue is that there's something wrong with the system? And many people identified it correctly, which was when you turn the knob. This is the tuning knob. This is the tuning pointer. When you turned it originally, if you turned it to the right, the needle moved to the left. And if you moved it to the left, the needle moved to the right. It was strung backwards. Why was it strung backwards? Well, because this set had been worked on sometime in the past. I knew that actually before I even turned the knob the very first time when I unboxed it and looked at it, because, and this may be hard for you to see, this is the knob that was on the shaft here. Like, it's all kind of bent and mangled up like this. It goes right there. That's the part you actually turn. This knob may be hard for you to see. It's all gouged and bent and chewed up. And if you look really carefully, you can see the marks in the aluminum. This is an aluminum knob on a plastic base. There's actually plier marks in the aluminum. Why is that? Why is this so beat up, and why was this strung incorrectly? This set is from 1977. Back in the day, there was a problem, and there was actually a NuTone field service bulletin about the problem. The tuning shaft here, this shaft, which fits in a bushing here that's bolted into the chassis metal and has a little E-clip on the back of it to hold it in place so the shaft turns and the bushing stays stationary. There was a problem with these where, because of dissimilar metals between the bushing and the shaft, they would tend to freeze up and become harder and harder to turn until you eventually got to the point where you virtually couldn't turn it at all. And because of the way it would bind up, there were many sets that had broken dial cords, because that's what happens. That's why the knob's all chewed up, because it became harder and harder for the people to turn. And so somebody got the idea that, well, we can use a pair of pliers, that'll work. And it probably did for a while. And then at some point, the dial cord probably broke, and then someone, don't know who, could have been a NuTone person, could have been a do-it-yourselfer, don't really know, somebody replaced it, and when they did it, they wound it around the tuning shaft in the wrong direction, so when you would turn it, the pointer moved the wrong way. And I've seen lots of sets like this. This was a factory known problem, and back in the day when NuTone would send out service bulletins, this is before the internet, before email, and even before fax machines, they would send out these big white envelopes, like legal size envelopes with big green stripes on the front of it. It says important NuTone service bulletin, and there would be a description of the problem, and the engineering department is working on it, and they're going to come up with a solution really soon, and they'll keep us apprised and everything. And then a week later or so, there'd be an update. It would come in the mail, and they figured out what's wrong with it, and they're solving the problem. Back in those days, usually they would tell you, well, we're going to come out with a service repair kit. It'll be a new bushing and nut and E-clip and the tuning shaft, and we're going to send every authorized NuTone service center 5 or 6 of them at no charge. So if you have customers with problems, you can take care of it for them right away, and it's all covered under warranty. And I would also guess that if it may have come with a dial cord, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. If not, usually they were very flexible about things. You could call them if you had a customer with a broken dial cord, and they would send you one. And you know, it was a good company back, especially back in those days where things were taken care of. Nowadays, can't get any of that. However, fortunately, I've got a whole bunch of dial cords. These are not brand new because they haven't made them in years and years and years, but these come off sets to get scrapped down for parts. There's nothing wrong with them. We save them for when a customer needs one. The other thing that happens on these is, move that out of the way and we'll turn this over. The dial cord ends up on the tuning drum. This is the tuning drum. This is the AM/FM tuner. And when you turn the shaft, the drum rotates. And the rotating drum, the strings actually pull on the drum because it ends here and here, has 2 ends of course because it's a string. On this end, there's a spring, and the spring provides tension to the dial cord so it stays on track and it turns the way it's supposed to and all those sort of things. Whoever worked on this previously did what a lot of people do, which is they also mangled the heck out of the spring. It's all bent in the middle and stretched out. And the problem with this is when you put it on, it doesn't provide the correct tension on the dial cord, and then it's either too tight, and which means you can't hook it on sometimes, or it's too loose, and then when you turn the shaft, it tends to slip and it doesn't move the pointer evenly. It's like jerky and maybe hangs up at the ends because there's not enough tension and those kind of things. So I went to my source of parts and sourced a replacement spring, which is not bent and janky. So now we have the correct tension, so it turns smoothly. Looking for clues is part of what I do. It's part of the repair process, because if you look for clues, it gives you some insight into what else or what may need to be done that maybe isn't obvious all the time. It's hard to say. The other thing on this set, which I found interesting, this was a complete and total rebuild. It was in mostly operational condition, but it was obviously very old and tired. One of the things I noticed, I guess we'll turn it back over again, is whoever worked on this previously, there's a bunch of places, like here are 2 resistors, and on the leads of the resistors on this side, and there's a couple more. I think some of them actually I've replaced some parts already because this is all done. There's little solder blobs on the leads of the component, and the components were not replaced, and as far as I can tell, before I worked on this, no components had been replaced at all whatsoever. It was all totally original. So why are there solder blobs? I think it may have been because a fairly ordinary and regular technique that a lot of people use when they're working on a board like this, and you have to measure things or test things or whatever it is you're doing. Some people will solder little wires onto the leads of components where you have to measure more than once probably, and that's what I think these were. I think somebody tacked on little pieces of wire to make it easier to clip onto them or something. I'm not sure exactly, but it seemed kind of unusual because nothing else had really been done. The other thing, I think I mentioned, this came in mostly operational, but obviously old and tired, not in the best of condition overall. And one of the telltale signs of that are, these are 3 examples. These are 3 fairly ordinary electrolytic capacitors. These are all good brands. This is from the early days of NuTone. These are all Nippon Chemicon, which is a top line brand, one of the probably top 4 in the whole world. These 3 have a clue, and you can tell that there's a problem with the set in comparison to this one, which is the same age, and this is an original one that was replaced. So almost all electrolytic capacitors, as far as I know, have a plastic sleeve on the outside. It's an aluminum can with a plastic sleeve, and it'll have the manufacturer's name and the rating of the capacitor, sometimes the series number, sometimes a date code. It varies a lot from manufacturer to manufacturer. It usually shows the negative lead. This is the line for negative, and that corresponds with this lead down here on the bottom, and all these kind of things. So when these are made, this is a thermoplastic sleeve, and it's a lot like the plastic sleeve that you see on the tops of wine bottles, and you go to open your wine, you've got to cut the plastic sleeve and peel it off to get the cork out. So it's the same idea. It's just a round thermoplastic tube, and it goes over this, and it's heated for a few seconds, I assume, and it shrinks. It's heat shrink tubing, and it shrinks onto the body of the capacitor, and that's how the markings are, and it's like that. And how it's done exactly, I don't know. I've never seen a machine that actually does it. So this one, if you look at the top carefully, you can see how the black plastic thermal sleeve is folded over the top of the can. So it's got this nice rim edge around it like this, and you can see the aluminum in the middle. If we look at these, smaller, but same idea, electrolytic capacitor, aluminum can, plastic thermal sleeve on the outside. But if you look at the top, you'll see, if I hold it maybe the right way, you can see the plastic thermal sleeve is not folded over the top of the can. It's just right on the very edge. So there's that one, and there's that one. That one's got the remnants of it being folded over, and this one has a little bit of the remnants folded over also. So why is that like that? One of the things that happens with age and use are, as capacitors begin to fail, they have ever increasing internal resistance. And as they age, they very slowly transform themselves from being capacitors into being resistors. The resistance inside the capacitor raises up and up and up and up. When you have current flowing through a part, when it's a capacitor, it's all right. When it's a resistor, resistors do what when they have current flowing through them? They generate heat. And when these get hot, and we're not talking burning hot like on the stove and smoke and red flames and things, just internally hot, it causes the plastic thermal tube to shrink even more. And it very slowly continues to shrink, and it pulls back off the top of the can. It's a clue. It's a clue that these capacitors are at the end of their useful life. It's not even necessary, at least in my opinion. We don't test capacitors like this. It's not like I'm going to go through and test all the capacitors and say, these 4 need to be replaced, but these 7 are okay. No, I don't think so. This set's 45 years old, and they all need to be replaced, because the reality is, cost of this is almost nothing compared to the cost of you leave it, and then a year from now, one of them fails, and then you've got a problem, you got to fix it again. So it's foolish to say, no, we're going to measure and decide, just replace them all. But it's a clue as to the overall condition of the set in general, because it has an obvious problem that's ongoing. The other reason I knew that this set had been worked on, and this little capacitor, this actually came out from the area of the board where I showed that somebody had put solder blobs on the leads of some of the components. This one was sitting right next to one of those components, and if you look down here on the bottom, you can see where the thermal sleeve is missing, gouged up, torn, overheated, I don't know exactly. It's got soldering iron damage. Somebody was soldering around this and probably got the soldering iron too close to it or touched it, and it burned away the thermal sleeve, and that's why you can see it's all raggedy and you can actually peel bits of it off. You can see the aluminum can inside because the plastic covering is gone. So thank you for everyone who responded to the original video about the problem with this and looking for the clue. Looking for clues is important. It's part of what we do. You have to look for clues because it makes your job easier. That's why when I talk to people on the phone about their equipment and the problems they're having with it, I ask tons and tons and tons of questions, because the more information I have and the more clues I can get out of the answers, the better idea I have of what to expect when the thing shows up to be fixed. So I've got to get this one finished back up because I want to try to get the customer called so we maybe get it shipped out tomorrow for him. And I know he's been waiting to have it fixed for a long time, so he's probably anxious to get it back. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.